All right, everybody, welcome back. So in the last video, I showed you my problem child tank. In this video, I'm going to show you what has quickly started to become one of my favorite tanks. I'm starting to feel like I've got it kind of figured out when I got this tank set up, and it's been very, very successful. Again, I'm going to try and stay zoomed out at the moment just so you have an overall view of the tank. I know this is the first time you're seeing this tank. I didn't have any monologue videos from when I was just making these for myself on this tank. So this is the first video I've done on this tank at all. It's the first time you're going to see it in any of the videos. So I'll try and stay zoomed out a little bit because I recognize my equipment isn't great. I dropped a little bit of food in the middle there so that if I can actually encourage any of the shrimp to come out and eat off of that, we'll zoom in on it so you can get a look at them. Maybe we get lucky and one of the buried ones comes down here. But again, as with all of my shrimp tanks, I find that my shrimp really, because of the amount of biofilm available to them in the tank and the floaters and everything else, for the most part, they don't have a lot of interest in like fish food or manufactured food for them. They tend to stay in the leaves and on the floaters and on the wood to eat, and they don't tend to come out and go after shrimp food nearly as often as you might expect them to, maybe in a bare bottom tank. I think that's just part of having a tank with as many hiding spots and planted and that sort of thing with shrimp. They just seem to prefer that. So this is my favorite tank. It might be my favorite tank in the whole house. I feel like when I set this tank up, I started to get a handle on how to do things better. So I'll go over the setup on this. Again, it's very much like the other ones. It's a Higer double sponge filter with a biomechanical media place in the bottom. That's filled with Eheim bio balls and a tablespoon or so of crushed coral in each one of those containers at the bottom of the sponge. However, that and the light being the night crew light, 12 hours a day, 30 some odd percent, 10 or 15, 5 or 10% blue light for an hour at the end of that. That is probably, that and the water lettuce are probably about where the tank similarities end. And the rest of it is going to start to be quite different. And this will be kind of the template for the rest of the shrimp tanks that I set up. And if I ever redo the two that I previously set up, I'll do them this way. So when I set up this tank, I believe at that point I had started to definitively find that no, dirted tanks are fine for shrimp, because I found that my 20-gallon tall, all of the shrimp that I had in there that I thought had died because of the dirted bottom had in fact died because of my own carelessness. And there is now a thriving colony there. So I decided I'm going to try it with the Snowball Shrimp. And I realize you probably haven't seen any shrimp yet in this video, and I'm going to start to explain why. But I set this tank up as a dirted tank. So there is probably 1.5 to 2 inches. Yeah, that might be more than I needed, of Miracle Grow organic potting mix in the bottom of this tank in mesh bags. Now, the reason I put them in mesh bags is so that if I have any occasion to pull up a plant that has a heavy root system, I'm not going to pull up the dirt with it and pollute the tank. That's just my preference. That's why I've done it this way. So all of the dirt in this tank is in a mesh bag. It's probably 1.5 to 2 inches deep on the bottom throughout the tank. On top of that, I have some lava rock that I smashed up on the back patio. Actually, I probably did a better job of smashing up the patio than I did the lava rock. Didn't expect patio stones to break that easy. If you decide to set up a tank and you want to use lava rock, go find some that's already crushed. Trust me, whatever they want for it, it's worth it to not have to try and do it yourself. So yeah, there's about 2 inches of dirt in the bottom of this, and I've got a bunch, quite a bit of lava rock on top of that, big chunky pieces that I tried to break down as small as I could. I'd say, I mean, if you were going to average it out, maybe 1/2 inch thick across that. So, and that was done because my understanding is lava rock does promote a lot of um, bacteria growth, beneficial bacteria growth, both oxygenated and non-oxygenated. Is that anoxic or anaerobic? Either way. Um, I honestly think that the substrate of this tank is doing more of the filtering than the filter. I know it doesn't look it because this tank has heavy, heavy tannins in it, but this is one of the clear tanks I think I have. So setting this tank up, the dirt, the lava rock, couple of inches, 2, 3 inches of sand, same black sand on top for the same reasons, because I don't want to see the detritus in the mulm as easily as I would see it on a lighter colored surface. It's also my understanding that shrimp coloration sometimes can vary dependent upon their background. One of the shrimp channels, it might have been Richard with the Neocaradina Shrimp Handbook. He might have suggested that having a darker background and a darker substrate tends to encourage brighter color growth. I don't know if that's true, but why not? Sand is sand. It all costs the same whether it's a black sand or a white sand. So we tried black. This is Cerio stone that's in here, and driftwood that I got off of Amazon, which definitely have to soak it. My God, I soaked it for 2 or 3 days, and every 12 hours or so, I would empty the bucket that it was soaking in, and it was just like black. So the amount of tannins that came out of this is quite extreme, and you can tell in this tank compared to my others, this is heavy, heavily laden with tannins. It's also my favorite look. This camera doesn't do it justice to how it looks, especially this tank, but it's by far my favorite, that browny, black water kind of look. And it's so healthy for the fish and the shrimp, and it's properties of being able to kind of resist, I guess, bacterial and virus infections on fish and shrimp. It seems to do such a fantastic job. The plants in here were all taken out of other tanks that I have throughout the house. All of the Anubias were clippings, all of the Atra in the back, the temple grass, the water lettuce, the Java moss. What else is in here? I've got crypts in here. I've taken some of the super red Ludwigia and stuck it in here, although that's a little harder to see. This has all been planted with leftovers from other tanks. There's some dwarf grass in here. It's not doing real well. There's some Monte Carlo that I stuffed in the middle of here that is not doing great. Oh, while they're center stage, that albino that's bigger than everybody else, that's Dum Dum. I have very few fish that are named. Ninja is the betta upstairs, and this is Dum Dum. uh, this albino Cory was originally in the little 5 gallon upstairs with Snowflake the betta, and just sort of outgrew that tank. Finally dropped him in the 20 gallon tall downstairs. And that sufficed for a while, continued to grow, and I start to feel like was claustrophobic in that tank. So when this tank got started and stabilized, I dropped him down here. For those of you with really keen eyes, you'll probably realize that that is most likely not a male albino. I'm pretty sure, in fact, Dum Dum is a female. My wife named him Dum Dum simply because in the 5 gallon tank, she was constantly banging off of the walls. She's very active for an albino, always swimming around, always on the move, which is great because she's always stirring up the sediment on the bottom and kicking it into the water column so that it can get up to the filter and get removed. But I thought I'd mention that while Dum Dum is the center screen so I don't forget. So that's the setup of this tank. Pretty straightforward. Lots of clippings of different plants from different tanks, all planted into the substrate. Same equipment, same filter, same everything. Now, few things very different about this tank because of the setup. Number one, if you ever do a dirted tank, the one thing that you are going to notice, especially after you just set it up, is that it spends a lot of time bubbling. As air escapes the cracks and crevices of the substrate below it. It will bubble through as nutrients break down in the soil beneath. It will release different gases. Now, there's lots of people on the internet that might suggest that those gases are poisonous to your fish because it's methane. I don't think that's the case. I see bubbles come out of the bottom of this tank, or did anyways, all the time. And I've never had a shrimp death in this tank. I've never had a fish death in this tank. It's always ticked along fine. I think more likely it's carbon dioxide that is coming out of the bottom as part of that process, which is actually good for the plants. Water super, super clear in here. Pretty sure that's part of the deep substrate and the lava rock that I have in here. However, the one thing I will say about this, I was so hesitant to go into a dirted tank with shrimp. I wish I had done it sooner. This tank went rock solid stable almost immediately from the get-go. This tank was set up, if the other one was set up, this was set up probably early part of May, and therefore shrimp wouldn't have been added to it until the very end of May, early part of June. It's middle end of August now. And where I'm at with this tank from a breeding perspective, a couple of weeks back, I noticed at least 3 buried females in this tank. There are still 3 buried females in this tank, but there are also several baby shrimp. I'll see if I can zoom in on an area where there's one right now. I'm sorry, I know for a shrimp tank, there's not a lot of shrimp in here. I'll get to that. But if we look here, if we look up here, up on the top of that driftwood, you can see there's a baby up on top of that driftwood. And there's usually a bunch in the Java moss as well, but I'm afraid with this camera, we're probably not going to see it. I think what I'll do here, just while I'm talking away, we'll try to get in on something to watch. And maybe we'll get lucky and the shrimp will go towards that food that I dropped in here and we can get a good look at them. Maybe we'll get lucky, one of the buried females will come along. But like I said, shrimp in this tank have a tendency to hang out at the surface or on the plants. They don't really go after the shrimp food. And I think that's just because there's so much biofilm available to them. That's just what they prefer. That and the fact that Dum Dum is pretty rambunctious, although I have seen them feeding around her before and not had any issue. Again, albino cories do not seem to go after baby shrimp. Even this big one here, I have seen around much, much smaller shrimp, never seen a problem with it. So to me, I don't think there's an issue with keeping cory cats and shrimp. But so on to the process. This tank setup went into very stable right away. Within a couple of weeks, it just was rock solid, never a change in any of the values. I don't even really hardly ever throw a test strip in this tank anymore. It always comes back exactly the same, and there's never a need. Everybody in here is super happy. I have even seen breeding of the cories in here, even between the big female and the tiny males that are in here somehow. Nothing's come of it, but not a big deal. So I had a problem when I first started this tank, and it was entirely my fault. The cherry shrimp came, or snowball shrimp, sorry, I guess is what we should refer to them as, came in 2 separate bags, and I needed to get them all in one container so I could drip acclimate it. So I put the container down in the laundry room sink, the big plastic tub sink. I emptied the first bag into it, started to empty the second bag into it, and I don't know what happened. Somehow slipped, and a good chunk of the shrimp that were in that bag went down the drain and not into the container I had ready for them. So this tank, although I bought, I think it was about 20 snowball shrimp, out of that, I probably had 11 or 12 that made it. So I was very surprised to see breeding taking place as quickly and as often as I saw it happen in here. They got buried pretty quickly thereafter. Within a few weeks, And there are now, I believe, 3 separate generations of snowball shrimp in this tank because there are 3 very different sizes. In fact, if I go back to where we were, I'll try not to make everybody dizzy by doing all this. Now I zoom in up here. Now you can see, I think, and I know the focus is terrible, but you can see there are 2 babies. Maybe you can even see the third. And there's one baby that's just taken off now and swimming to the back that's much smaller than the one that's in the foreground. So that's at least 2 separate buried shrimp that have dropped their eggs in this tank just there. And I saw one the other day that was about the size of honestly a dandruff flake. And if I just pan over, if I pan over here, you can see there's a couple shrimp here as well. There's one there to the lower left a little bit. There's one above them. There are actually a bunch of shrimp in this tank. I do wish one of my buried females would come out so I could show her to you and why they call them snowballs. But these particular shrimp, when they are buried, the eggs of different shrimp can be multiple different colors. You've seen red shrimp with clear eggs and orange shrimp. These shrimp, specifically their eggs, go bright white. And they call them snowballs because it looks, when they're buried, like they're carrying a group of snowballs underneath of them. So that's why they call them snowball shrimp. And I really wish I could catch a female out somewhere and show her to you. But unfortunately, in this tank, with all the hiding spots that there are, when they get buried, they have a tendency to disappear for a little while. One of my favorite tanks. I will never do anything but dirted, planted tanks, I think, ever again, even for shrimp. This tank has been so successful right from the word go. It's been super stable. I haven't had pH issues. I haven't had ammonia issues. I haven't had issues of any kind in this tank. The only thing I've had to keep up on is removing the floaters from the surface to allow light down here so that the plants continue to grow. This tank cost me less to set up than any of my other ones because I just use clippings from other tanks. I keep it fed with catappa leaves that I usually toss off in the back there just so they don't take up a bunch of room in the tank. Super, super successful. Super successful. Anybody who's ever thinking of getting cherry shrimp for the first time, honestly, I would strongly recommend going after snowball shrimp if you have them in your area. They're prolific breeders. They look great. The males are almost clear like glass when they swim by and you see them. And the females, if they're not buried with sort of like the collection of snowballs underneath, their saddle is almost like a white diamond shape on their back. It's very, very distinctive. I really wish they were out. I wish my shrimp responded to me feeding them like others do so that I could focus in on them easily. But like I said, because of all the biofilm available to them, more the snails will eat that piece of snowflake food than the shrimp will. So it's very hard for me to get a good shot of them. I was hoping that they would come out while I was talking to you here so I could get a good picture of them, but I'll try and do that in future videos that I put out. But all around, great tank. Dirted tanks are so stable and so good for shrimp. This is what I intend to do with all of my future tanks. I have 2 more tanks I want to set up here in the future. One more for breeding another variety of shrimp. Probably do blues because they're pretty popular. And I think I'm going to do a live bearer tank as well. Maybe some fancy broccoli swordfish, maybe some platinum Dumbo guppies. Kicking around the idea of doing some Hillstream louches, maybe. Not super sure yet. I'm hoping that while I'm out like this, you can see the baby zooming around every now and then. So you know I'm not lying. There are shrimp in here. There are adult shrimp in here, even if we're not seeing them. But yeah, set up just like my other tanks. Super, super stable. I really regret not having done dirter tanks for my other two, but at the time I couldn't find information about whether that was safe, and I thought maybe that was my issue with my other dirted tank and the shrimp that I had put in there that seemed to die off. Obviously, as it turns out, it wasn't. This is a super stable way to go. Some dirt, some lava rock, cap it off with a bunch of sand, shove a bunch of plants in it, and call it a day. And since then, really, I haven't paid any attention to this tank since that point, other than keeping an eye out for babies when I'm removing floating plants. Super simple setup, super rock solid. I highly recommend Snowball Shrimp to anybody who's first getting into this. So easy to keep, and they breed very true to their line. Very little culling, I think, is going to be required out of this tank. My favorite tank to date, guys, by far. I wish you all the success in your journey to setting up shrimp tanks. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll get to it in the next one, guys. Maybe I'll see if I can't find a couple of pictures of shrimp to put on as a thumbnail, because there haven't been any in this video. Sorry, guys. Take care. Until the next one.